Take 3. The first time I do this, every single time, I forget that my computer also has a camera, and so the first take of every video is me just taking a picture of myself. You'd think I'd learn, right? Big brain? No. Right, somebody sent me a question about POV. Very, very important. Always send me questions if something is not clear to you. And the question was, I see that you're talking about limited third, and I'm not sure what that means. Great question, really great question. So I don't know where everybody is in their writing career, so let's just take a step back and talk about all the different kinds of POVs that you could use. So you could be writing in first. First is, I am doing this, I was doing that. It's the I perspective. In first, you can only see the world through that character's eyes. You don't get into anybody else's head, you don't get into anybody else's perspective, you don't know what anybody else is doing. It's all from the I perspective. It is particularly popular in YA and in what's called women's fiction. A lot of people say they don't understand what women's fiction is, and I think that's just because they're not widely read enough. Women's fiction tends to deal with the why and the how of the story from an interior perspective, usually a female perspective, but there's a lot more interiority in women's fiction. Of course, it is looked down upon because it doesn't match up with the canon. And the canon is hundreds of years of, she says lovingly because I love the canon, hundreds of years of men writing. And what became accepted and popular was from extremely rich people. You have to remember that the people who were writing, the Keatses and the Byrons and the Dickenses, they were at some level, well, Dickens was a journalist, but they were at some level independently wealthy. They were able to spend time writing. They were privately educated. And it was the man's province. And so third, with what's considered objective, became the way to tell a story. That's very, very much about the ruling class. I'm talking about English literature, so it's different across the world, but this is, where my expertise comes in. So the canon is predominantly rich white men writing in third because it's objective. The rise of the novel takes us into feelings and thoughts, and it's considered lowbrow. And that still drags over into how people talk about books. They still talk about books as if being objective and outside the experience is a better reading experience. But that's just fashion. That's just history pressing down on how you're going to write your book. So you need to think about what kind of story you're telling, why you're telling it, but you're driven by your audience. What does your audience want? Do they want something that is outside that experience and a bit clinical? And some of them do, they really do. They don't want to spend time on emotion. Or do they want something with more interiority? So you need to turn those dials up and down, whichever voice you choose. If you're in first, second, or third, don't choose second. But you need to turn up and down that interiority. And in some of these voices, you have none at all. So think about that for your audience. Think about how much, I'm looking at the wrong screen. See, I write on the big screen, but my camera's on the small screen, so I'm not even looking at you. I just look like a, right, so back to the point. First person. I am doing this, I was doing that. Everything is from their POV. You can't go into another person's experience. You can't know what another person is thinking or feeling. Everything comes from that single character's POV. You don't switch POV in a scene, So you can't go into another character's POV. So it can't be that you are telling the story from Buffy's point of view and everything is I'm running in the graveyard and I'm sticking stakes into the vampire's heart to, in the same scene, Spike's point of view, where, you know, you're going to love me or else because this is what I want. But you can have both of those POVs in a book from first. You just need to switch either the scene or the chapter. You can't do it in the same scene. If you're doing it in the same chapter, you use a, the hashtag or whatever symbol you use for the break. The break is what you use for either a change in place, a change in time, or a change in POV. If you've got one character and you are in their POV and they continuously do what they do, you're just using paragraph breaks. You're not using a scene break. That's a very particular piece of craft that tells the reader we're changing place, we're changing time, big jump in time, not small jump in time, not she drove there in her car, although don't show us driving in the car, or change a POV. So first, you can have more than one, but you can only know through their eyes. Why is this so popular? There is a theory that the rise of both first and limited third have to do with single shooter POV video games. So we are so used to now being the driver who is seeing all these things from this perspective, that this has risen into the popular consciousness. We want to be behind the eyes of that particular character. So first, we're done first. Second, second is wonderful. Don't use it. There are examples, and I'm going to read you an example of a really, really good use of second. Second is you walk into a bar with a chicken on your head. You ask the barman for a drink, and he brings it to you. So that's second, right? Super tricky. You really have to know what you're going for, and you really have to be playing with that distancing thing. The example that I'm going to read you is a superb use. She knows why she's using it and what she's doing. Third is he ran into the salon and said, "Do you have a slot for me?" She burst into the salon and killed everyone. So I'm just playing with gender stereotypes. Don't mind me. So it's he, she, and I'm sure that in the next 20 years we'll have some more use of gender neutral terms, but at the moment, predominantly, it's he and she. So that can be he or she in present tense or past. We usually are in past. That's much more common. And then it breaks down even further. So it breaks down into third limited. And third limited means that you can only be in the POV of one character. Really, really super duper big. Don't buy it unless you're really in and doing your writing. But once you're in, this is fantastic. I tried reading it before I was in a book and I was like, what is she talking about? It's much too theoretical. But once you're actually doing it, it's fabulous. All right, limited POV, limited third, which may also be called deep, close, internal, or subjective, is coloured by the direct viewpoint of a single character, as if we're actually in their head. Part of their immediate experience is in first person. So it does feel like first person. Limited third. Then there's something called objective third. An objective third goes into nobody's head and knows nobody's thoughts, and is outside the experience, only describing action in third. It's not very popular. It has been popular, but currently it's not very popular because it distances you from the experience. You're not actually in there seeing the world. And then there's third omniscient. And third omniscient means that you can go into any character's ideas and thoughts and feelings, but there are rules about how you go in and then aren't head hopping. Head hopping is you're in Jane's brain and you understand what she's thinking, and the narrator is telling you what she's thinking. So there's still some distance, because in Omniscient Third, the narrator is telling you what she is thinking, rather than in Limited, she is telling you what she is thinking. And then the narrator can hop over here to John and tell you what John is thinking. But Gardner was the one who came up with this rule of there have to be 3 points before you go into somebody else's head, unless it's so that it's not considered head hopping. And head hopping is going directly from Jane to John. And the brain science is that it's too jerky for your audience. Like, how did I get here so fast? Of course, there are people who play with that. But it's the rules. You have to understand the rules before you're going to break them. But the reason that I'm encouraging you to be in close third is because it's so immediate, and you get into somebody's head and you understand their thoughts and feelings, and you can tell us about their reactions. And that currently is considered one of the richest ways to tell a story. We are already at 10 minutes. And I had a bunch of examples that I was going to give you. So, different voices, and how they work. But I think 10 minutes is enough time. Maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a completely optional second video where I'm going to read passages that I picked from these books, and in the comments you can tell me if you know which voice they're written in. So I'm going to stop here, and then I'm going to challenge you to come with me on this little journey of, do you know what these different voices are? And do you know how third then breaks down? And do you know what the impact is on the reader for each of those? Oh, let's go back to... Oh, no! Oh, sugar plum fairies.